Dad, the world's largest automaker, Toyota, they are sounding some alarm bells. Jack Hollis, their head of sales here in North America for Toyota, essentially saying, we don't know when inventory is going to get better, but we think it's at least a year away. This is some pretty concerning stuff, especially because Toyota is also now in the midst of a pretty major crisis in China as a result of droughts and power rationing. Not a good look for Toyota Corporation, and honestly, a pretty scary message for the rest of the auto industry.
Absolutely. Basically what Jack's telling everybody is we don't know when it's going to get better, but we know for sure it's not going to get better this year and for most of next year. So we just have to accept the fact that because of all the supply chain issues, because of the drought in China, because there's still some COVID issues around the world, that we're not going to see Toyota, or for the most part, most of the manufacturers, be able to increase their production to the levels that they would like. Now, I'm not saying that they're ever going to increase their production to the levels we saw prior to the pandemic, but I know all of the manufacturers would certainly like to see a much greater number of cars in dealer inventory. I know in this article, he said for a lot of Toyota dealers, they weren't measuring it as a day supply. They were measuring it as an hour supply. As in nationally, there was a 36-hour supply of Toyotas that were unsold. That doesn't bode well for them or anybody at this point.
Yeah, not in the slightest, Dad. Jack Hollis was speaking at an event just last week at that Automotive Press Association put on. And yeah, like you said, 36-hour supply of inventory. And Pops, we've talked with our own team, and we've figured out from our community how long you're expected to wait if you're going to order a Toyota. So you're not going to buy one off of the dealer's floor because, well, they have a 36-hour supply. Dad, if it's a non-hybrid vehicle, you could be waiting up to a year. 6 months to a year is kind of the expectation there. If it's a hybrid vehicle or one of their prime plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, people are waiting up to 18 months, even 2 years, Dad, some people are being told. This is not sustainable. However, on the flip side, average transaction prices for Toyota vehicles are higher than they've ever been before, and average incentive amounts are lower than they've ever been before. Mm-hmm. So Toyota has some incentive to make sure that they don't go back to where they'd previously been, which Jack Hollis said at the event, that they're not expecting to go back to that. But they definitely don't want people waiting up to 2 years for their prime vehicles, for example.
As we know, 2 years ago, the number of cars that were typically in the supply at dealerships was about 450,000 vehicles on a monthly basis. Right now, that number sits at close to 100,000. Now, everybody says they don't expect it to get back to the 450,000, but I would think somewhere along the line, Toyota would like to have their dealers carrying about 200,000 vehicles worth of inventory on a monthly basis so that the people who don't want to wait 12 to 18 months or 6 to 12 months, those people will be able to find a car and be able to scratch their itch, so to speak, and go home in that car the day they go into the dealership. Because some people literally can't or won't wait that amount of time to get a vehicle.
Which has led to truly historic average transaction prices over at Toyota. Dad, last quarter, the first quarter of their fiscal year, this data was just from a few weeks ago, average transaction prices for a Toyota in the first quarter of their fiscal year, so Q2 here in the United States, $37,336 for a Toyota. For a Toyota, the Avalon increased 8% and the Corolla rose 11% quarter over quarter. And also, Dad, incentives amounts are lower than they've ever been before. Mm-hmm. Incentives are down 66% year over year to an average of $772 per vehicle. That is the first time since 2017 that incentives were below $1,000 for Toyota vehicles in a quarter. And this is all the while, Dad, Toyota's North America sales were down 23% year over year. So there's pros and there's cons. There's more cons than pros, I think. And Toyota's been very honest about that and very forthcoming, in expressing that, whereas we've seen other automakers try and make it sound like things are okay, and then you end up in your quarterly earnings reports talking about how your vehicle production quality is not so hot, but we're not naming names here. So long story short, The new car issues. If Toyota's saying that this is going to be the new normal for a while, we should believe them. If Mary Barra comes out and says, "No, we're going to have full production next week," I don't know. I'd side with Toyota on that one.
Especially with the Asian brands. If you know, we know Toyota's having issues. We know Honda's having issues. We know Nissan's having issues. We know Mazda's having issues. They're pretty major players in the automotive industry. If they're having the type of issues that they're having, I am sure that the other major players are having issues as well. Maybe not quite as severe as the Asian brands, but they're all still having issues, and they're all having difficulty producing the number of cars that they had projected to produce for this year. They're all going to fall probably significantly below what their annual projections were at the start of the year.
Well, let's give Alfa Romeo a lot of credit, Dad. Their inventories are way through the roof. Oh, wait, that's because no one wants to buy them. Okay, we will be back with another update with regards to Toyota and other automakers after the next quarter. But something tells me that we're going to see more headlines that are a bit more. And even we saw it earlier this week with Auto Forecast Solutions that they said automakers may have been underreporting the impacts of the chip shortage. Okay. Let's be prudent. Let's be thoughtful here. The impacts on the new car market are not going away anytime soon.
No, not. Well, we know if Toyota's telling us it's not for a year, then trust them. It's not for a year.